Fine. Good morning, folks. How are you? My name is Gavin Glass, as Brian said, and I am a musician first and foremost, a record producer, sometime radio DJ over on Radio Nova, and I am very occasionally a music director on films. I was recently the on-set music director for Sing Street. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that. We've made a bunch of kids in a band, but I worked on that. But that wasn't always my occupation. I was once upon a time a financial advisor. I was a debt collector for a very short period of time, and I'll go into how that all happened. But all I ever wanted to do was do music, and it was one of those things that I came from a working class family where it was just not a career, it was a hobby, and there was a long struggle with, you know, my folks to try and convince them that this was my calling in life. And from that, there was a lot of tension and stuff, but it was a long road anyway. But I was kind of finished school at 18 and studied an arts degree for about 20 minutes and realised that it wasn't for me, and left. Came home and told my mother I was joining a rock and roll band, and there was, you know, major catastrophe. So I was marched down to all the local banks and insurance companies to put a CV in, and eventually I ended up working in a filing room for some insurance company down in Blackrock. And then after a couple of months, they took me on in their administration, and then for the administration, the sales guys. I was about 20 at this stage. The sale guys trained me up and put me out as a consultant. I was the youngest consultant. This feels very weird for me, by the way, talking about myself like this, so you just have to hold my hand a little bit. But yeah, so the sales guys trained me. I went through all these. This is around the time when there was so much money in Ireland. It was just a vulgar thing that there was these sales training courses we were on, all to make us these robotic machines that would go out and sell pension funds and take investment money from newly found rich people. But it was something that just never sat right with my conscience. And these sales training courses, they were great. It was all about the power of positivity, and you are the master of your own destiny, and there's nothing you can't do when you have a positive outlook. And it was all really great, but the only thing I took of it was that I was going to get out of, the finance sector, and, you know, follow what my dream was, what my heart was, what was going to make me happy. I was 21. I was way too young to be making the money that I was making. I wasn't. I had no passion for what I was doing. It was tough going. While the central bank and all these regulatory bodies were out there, you know, there was so much working in between the lines of what they had set down, and it just never, with my conscience, it just never sat with me, and it was caused so much depression. I mean, I was pretty much stoned from 21 to 30, you know, just because it was, you know, I was self-medicating, I was miserable. But I remember when the axe fell for me was I was going to see a couple who were just waiting on their pension fund, and my boss at the time had told me that no matter what they say, you're putting their money in this particular fund. And it was a fund that I knew from talking to people that it was based on properties in the UK and America that I knew were going to go wallop. But there was an incentive for the company, for commission, to go into this. So I was in the car waiting to go in, and I couldn't. I was nauseous. I just couldn't. So I just literally quit there and then on the spot. I couldn't go in to tell this man who had worked for his, you know, his 25% of his pension fund that we should put into this fund, knowing full well that it was going to be bogey. So I just quit and had nothing. I'd racked up a huge amount of debt myself because I was buying musical equipment as if some form of retail therapy. But yeah, so I quit. I had a loaded debt. Didn't really have any career prospects, and I started a piano tramping, basically, is what I used to call it, where I would do two-hour sets in different wine bars around town between, you know, 10 o'clock to sort of 4 in the morning, and it was terrible, and it was going nowhere. So I decided that the only way for me to get out of it was to just set up my own little studio, and I took over an old room in the middle of Capel Street, and slowly started kind of building up a small name for myself. I had no money to start the studio, and anybody, if there is anyone here that is interested in sound and starting up a studio or anything like that, the only thing that I will say to you that you can start with loads of money and you can start with no money, but you'll get the same result if you don't have persistence. It'll fail. It was just so much work that I had to do for free and insane hours. But eventually, my name started to kind of be building up as a producer, and it was from that I kind of met Lisa Hannigan, and I kind of started working with her. I'd released a couple of solo albums up to this point that had never really made any dint. They'd kind of get good reviews, but in terms of, they never got any radio play. They never got any, record sales or anything like that. It was something that, it was definitely like pushing a big boulder up a hill. But I joined Lisa Hannigan's band anyway, and I spent 6 years with her. And from that, I got to tour I got to tour America 5 or 6 times, Europe. But all the time that I was on tour with her, I would spend my day before the sound check going to local pawn shops, second-hand stores, antique shops, and basically looking for musical equipment bargains, anything that was rare, anything that was broken, that stuff that they hadn't made. And I was shipping all of this back and collecting this crazy collection of equipment. But after kind of 5-6 years with Lisa, I had built up this collection, and I had moved studios a couple of times. I kept kind of going up to a bigger place. Then about 3.5 years ago, I took over an old bakery, but again, with very little money and just with good help from friends and people that kind of saw that I was doing. I couldn't hang a picture frame. I could write a song about it, but I had a lot of fellas come in and help me kind of paint the place. And so I pretty much built this studio up out of a shell, and put a lot of this equipment that just isn't made anymore, analog tape machines, all vintage tape echoes, technology that's kind of, computers have come out and emulated it, but there's a purist in me that feels that this old recording technique is just sounds better, it plays better, and it's a truer form of art, because you don't have the beauty with tape of, when you're recording, you can do anything with a computer now. You can send your music to the moon and back if you want to. With tape, it's still all about the performance. So my whole shtick really as a producer is that I try and capture performances and not, I've never been really concerned about the latest sounds or anything like that. It's all about trying to preserve art and keeping the performance as real as possible. But since I opened, Orphan Recording is the name of the studio. Orphan began in 2010, and I think on last count we've done, I think it's like 520 recordings in those 5 years for different acts. The 2016 Choice long list was announced there 2 days ago, and 14 albums on it of the 60 odd all came through Orphan. So it's one of the last remaining studios that are out there, because the industry, the way it has gone, is just pretty much, annihilated the recording studios. I think there's 3 or 4 kind of fully functioning proper studios that aren't schools or sound training courses, which is what most studios have become now. And I was looking into it, knowing that I was doing this talk, and there's over 700 kids every year qualifying as sound engineers, yet there's 4 studios. So there's a bit of an imbalance there. But I guess the thing that is keeping me going and is keeping my studio open is that I'm constantly trying to push the boundary of how I can make music work. I've been trying to figure out how with Facebook, with these live streaming, that people just aren't going to gigs anymore, and they're not buying records, and that's just the way it is. We have to pay for. We were supposed to pay for water, but we really don't. Nobody pays for music anymore. I mean, does everybody have a Spotify account here? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, no artists get anything, and I'm not here to badmouth that. I mean, that's just the way it is, and so many artists are going on how unfair the royalties are. But when you break down the music's been there since the beginning of time, and it was only ever lucrative for 60 years, really, from the 50s. Like when Elvis kind of came out, he changed everything, and that's when music started to become proper business. Before that, music was funded by patrons. It was, musicians were minstrels. They would travel for board and they would travel for food. But unfortunately, that unless we can figure out some way of surviving and making music lucrative for ourselves, that's what we were going to go back to. We will always create art. There is no shortage of bands wanting to record, but I'm predicting that in 5 years, that if there isn't some way of figuring out that, it's just going to be impossible. The touring for musicians has just pretty much shut down. I know, even from playing with artists that are what most people consider they're stars. They're not making money. They're barely breaking even on tours. It's just that the revenue is becoming. It's like in Star Wars, and those walls are closing in when they're trapped in the Death Star. That is pretty much what revenue and music is happening at the moment. So I think if we kind of wrap the presentation and go more into the exploration of things, that like we're going to have to figure out some new way of making art, and for it to be heard, and for the artists to be able to support themselves. The funded campaigns and all these are fantastic, but I mean that is, the way things have gone, and the way that music is just on the cloud. We are becoming the patrons and the sponsors of artists, that we're supporting our friends to do this. But I'm all about trying to find out how we can, like, particularly this city. Somebody once said this, Dublin was a city of 1,000 rock bands. I would say it's a city of 10,000 rock bands. It's, you look at the back of our currency, it's a picture of a fucking harp, and that's on Guinness. Music and Guinness, they are, in my mind, our two biggest exports, other than our people that, have emigrated so much over the years. But it's something that I don't have the solutions. I don't know what the answers are, but there is just something has to be done. And whether it's a radio, I mean, the show that I do on Nova is purely Irish music. I don't play any other music other than Irish acts. And in saying that, I mean, the sheer amount of music that I get into play, it's impossible, And we have no. In France, Canada, they have laws that a percentage. I think. Are you from France? No. Okay. You just have that kind of French look. But I think it's like 25% of all the music in France has to be French. Same with Canada. Canada have arts grants. Your first album is basically funded by the Canadian government. Once you go through the process and you do the application, but they will pretty much give you your first album funded, and they'll help fund studios. This, music is so important to the Irish. We've had years of, generations of suffering, and for me, music is the great healer. Music is what. My father has Alzheimer's at the moment, and I have a 11-month-old baby, and I'm seeing two, from the start of the child's life to, unfortunately, the end. And music is the one thing that was the first way I could communicate with my daughter. And well, my dad is like, he's still okay, but he's slipping. Music is the one thing that will always just bring him back to the man that he was before, And it's amazing that I'm seeing that at the moment. But yeah, I mean, like, if this is a Creative Mornings, and I'm all about trying to find out how we can work together about getting music, getting tech. I don't know the technology side of things. I don't know the graphic side of things, but there's definitely a way of us getting together and making art. But the times we live in, there's a comic book clown villain is now the world leader. In the 60s when this was happening, it was the folk singers that were the voice, of protest. And I think it's all gonna come full circle again. I think it's now is the most important time for music and any art, photography, whatever it is, whatever you're doing to create. That is all we have to do now. And it's the artist's voice that is going to be what's listened to, because the politicians aren't working. They're not making any sense. So yeah, let's talk.